Hey, welcome to 9394, a music podcast with Travis Roy. I'm really excited to be talking today about one of the great musicians of all time, Nik Crave, and of course his band, The Bad Seeds. Growing up at my house, my mom was really cool about letting us all listen to whatever music we wanted to listen to in the living room, like the main room, where everybody could hear it. I could listen to rap, metal, screamo, punk, fuck this, fuck that, whatever. It didn't matter. She didn't care about any of that kind of stuff. There was only one band that she had the kibosh on, and that was Nik Crave and the Bad Seeds. Not because of this album that I'm going to be talking about today with my friend Lauren, Let Love In, but because of Murder Ballads. My mom thought that album was gross. But I love it, and I love Nik Crave, and I love Let Love In. But no one I know loves Nik Crave and the Bad Seeds more than my friend Lauren. Lauren is a dear friend of mine. I met them in Philadelphia, and I was fortunate to make a lot of good friends while living there. Some people that I think will hopefully be a part of my life for the rest of it. But Lauren in particular, we got really close. They were really there for me through the COVID thing. They've been with me through breakups. So yeah, Lauren just really means a lot to me. And it means so much to me that they came on the show to talk about this album that means so much to them, this band that means so much to them, and of course this musician that means so much to them, that Nik Crave is Lauren's stage name, which is pretty cool. So here's me and Lauren talking about this album and this dude, Mr. Nik Crave.
I've searched the holy books. I tried to unravel the mystery of Jesus Christ the Savior.
Hello.
Hey!
Can you hear and see me okay?
I can hear and see you just fine. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's good to see your face.
Likewise.
Behavior. For an answer that refused to be found. I don't know why and I don't know how, but she's nobody's baby now.
It is funny to me that I'm chatting with you now on video after having met you in Philadelphia, and now I'm closer to you, I think, as the crow flies. However, that pesky Lake Michigan is right between us, and I believe the drive from here to your place and my old place in Philly to your place is probably the same.
Almost. We're like technically closer. Just seeing you actually makes me kind of a little bit homesick for Philly, to be honest.
If I elicit feelings of homesickness for Philadelphia from people seeing me, then I feel like I have done a good job in my life.
You are very Philadelphian.
But there are some things love won't allow. I held her hand, but I don't hold it now. I don't know why and I don't know how, but she's nobody's baby now.
Why don't you tell people how we met? How do we know each other?
The podcast story or like the real story?
Whatever you're comfortable with.
Well, I mean, I'm fine with saying that I swiped on you on Tinder because you were holding a stein of beer and had a fantastic big smile. And, you know, I'm also a professional hairstylist, and your baldness, I was like, great, won't ask me for a free haircut. It seems like he has a fun demeanor.
I've got it all. And that's how we met. We met over Tinder. You are still easily one of my best all-time Tinder swipes by far. And that while we only went on a couple dates, we became really good friends.
Yeah, and it was really fun dating someone, whichever way it ended up, who was not from Philly, because I love playing tour guide in cities. So we definitely had a fantastic time. We went to the Mutter Museum.
Of course.
Which is very, like, Philly specific. If people haven't heard of it, I have no affiliation. I do not get any money for this, but you should give them money. They're a good organization.
It is great, though.
Medical oddities and all that. And the art museum, the Philadelphia Art Museum, though we did not We are both good-looking people, I suppose, but we did not do the rocky run up the stairs. We were not there for that.
We walked up the stairs and then just took pictures. There was no jumping up and down. And of
Yeah.
course, on one of our dates, I didn't pick up this Nik Cave album, but I did pick up Nik Cave's Nocturama on vinyl.
Nocturama, yes.
It makes sense that that would be associated with you. But in doing this podcast, I get to let love in. I'm like, I hope, please, Lauren, do this show for me. There's no one else that could possibly talk about it like you.
But I think your initial thought when I said, well, you have to guess which album I would do, you understandably thought, oh, The Downward Spiral.
You were like, no, not quite. Then I was like, okay, what am I missing? Then as soon as I saw Nik Cave, I'm like, oh, fucking, of course. That's what it was.
My long-running nickname being Goth Lauren, it would make sense that you're like, well, obviously this chucklehead's going to want to do Nine Inch Nails.
The genres all kind of bleed and blend together as we get older. All those kind of categories mean less and less. But do you think Nik Cave and the Bad Seeds are goth?
I like to think so.
Mm-hmm.
I do think there's an interesting overlap of, I mean, you could argue that Johnny Cash is a goth icon.
He's the man in black. That makes perfect sense, actually.
I think a lot of genres, their aesthetic goes hand in hand with the music.
Okay, that's a really good point. Metal guys typically like with the long hair and like black t-shirts, and then
and you can look at a guy and be like, I bet he likes the Dead Kennedys and Sex Pistols, or you can look at someone and be like, I bet they really like the Decemberists.
Yeah,
and that's not a slight against anyone, like,
No, but you can kind of assume, if it was certain people, I guess. And of course, we all kind of, or most people have very broad tastes in music generally, but there's always one or two genres.
I think I made a meme that got literally nowhere on the internet, but it was the Mumford & Sons and Nik Cave, and they both write songs about the Dust Bowl that neither of them have lived in. Like,
especially Nik Cave, he's very fascinated with Appalachia, and I guess they both are.
And like the desert Southwest sort of.
Yeah, that aesthetic, I guess.
He covers a lot of classic folk stuff, and he does a song about John Henry,
Mm-hmm.
which Johnny Cash did,
Mm-hmm.
And some of it is cover, some of it is just an homage to, but he's Australian and lives in London. Not saying that he is not a man of culture and has traveled, etc., but
Sure.
He also was not in the Dust Bowl era,
Right. Yeah, he wasn't hanging with Woody Guthrie or anything.
He was not yet born, so.
So when it comes to Let Love In, do you remember when you first got into this album, like how you got into it?
I remember in a roundabout way being very, very into Metallica before I heard Let Love In.
Mm-hmm.
And then Metallica did the Garage Days and they covered Lover Man.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, ooh, this song sounds hot and dirty and weird and I like it. And then realizing, wait, these are all covers they're doing on this Garage Inc. album.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. There was not Wikipedia. There was not Quick and Easy, Spotify. I also did work at a record store on South Street at one point. So I was the final gasp of actual going to places to buy your music.
It's made a bit of a comeback, especially vinyl.
No, definitely. And that record store smartly has pivoted and they do a lot of vinyl now, which is fantastic.
Yeah, you took me there, actually.
Yeah, they move locations, but yes.
Yeah, it wasn't on South Street when you took me.
I forget how I then came back around to it, being around other goth people and whatnot and having bartended and stuff at places that were not Applebee's, I guess. Like, I've heard Nik Cave in between all of this.
So you were older. Like, what age are we talking?
I want to say I was 2021 when I heard Let Love In.
Okay, a little bit later than I would have guessed for you. But of course, I mean, that 2021 is still very formative years.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I was still in college. I am sure that I had heard Red Right Hand.
Sure, you had, right. Because you'd seen Scream and Dumb and Dumber.
Right. And plenty of other Nik Cave stuff prior to that. I just have a very specific memory of being in the computer room of this guy that I was dating at the time when I was like 20. And hearing opening note of that album and being like, what is this? Like,
life changer.
going through the album, and I believe I have, I'm sorry, gods of internet, please forgive me, I believe I downloaded it from Napster or LimeWire or something. And
okay, so now we know the timeline, 2000, 2004.
well, I actually don't think it was, but I can't remember. But I know that I didn't purchased the CD.
Okay.
Like, but I know that I burned a CD to put it in my car.
Gotcha. Well, that was the way it worked at that time.
In my mind, I have like several opening things that are very iconic, and like the bass line for Let Love In is like the bass line for dropping in Fat Bottom Girls on Queen. Like for me, like it's just like I'm like, it tickles that one little part of my brain.
And you're ready to go off.
Yeah.
I remember when this album came out vaguely, because where I grew up, there was, and I've mentioned this on the show before, this radio station in Windsor across the river in Canada called 89X. They just played amazing stuff, you know. I remember when Do You Love Me was a single, so I remember being like, I don't know, 13, 14 years old and hearing that song on the radio and being like, Nik Crave, is it? Okay, I kind of like this. And then I remember like hearing Red Right Hand, and so there was like a minute or like of 94 or 5, and so like where I was kind of aware of who he was. But I didn't really get into this album until much, much older, because the first album I ever actually got into of Nik Cave's was Murder Ballads. I really was like, my first love was like the classic Unrequited Love, and she got me into Murder Ballads, which I just obsessed over. And it kind of went from there into all this other stuff. And so I kind of like moved backwards, and really later, much later, like I got the Best Of album that came out in 98. So I had access to individual songs, but I didn't really listen to the album as a whole until I was much later in life, like in my late 20s, mid 20s probably. But Nik Cave is still like a big part of my life since my teens.
I mean, isn't that true for a lot of artists you might get into and stuff like that? You hear something and then you're like, oh shit, this band, music, whatever, has been around for a while. Let me dig back in.
Yeah, like the Birthday Present I wasn't aware of. Or even like actually
Birthday Party.
Oh yeah, excuse me, thank you. The Birthday Party, which I never really got into, but weirdly enough, I was listening to These Immortal Souls when I was like, I don't know, 11, 12 years old, which I forget the dude's name, but one of the Bad Seeds was, I gotta look it up now real quick.
Well, while you're looking that up, I mean, I, having worked at literally a goth record store, and your listeners don't know me, but I know that you can verify that it was actually a goth record store.
Yeah.
I had heard, before I put the pieces together, Einstreusende Neubauten, which is like the Bargeld, who was in the Bad Seeds for a very long time.
Okay.
And I had heard of that also independently and separately.
Okay, so that's like me, like with Roland S. Howard. I finally got his name.
Oh, okay. I do know that name. Oh, this is a good time then for my tangent about hating gatekeeping.
Okay, hit us with a tangent.
As you're talking, I was looking up, okay, so Murder Ballads came out in 96. I got to remember this for that album. Like, we're just having this discussion. And I'm like, but does it matter? If you like an artist, if you love an artist, like, and someone says, well, actually, and the only reason I correct you on The Birthday Party is because we're literally talking about the artist.
Oh, right. No, this is like a music podcast.
This is the appropriate time to correct someone.
I want to say the right fucking name of the band, that's for sure.
Right. But I'm sure you've seen cartoons and memes of like someone wearing a band t-shirt and it's like, oh, really? Do you like them? Name 3 albums they've had.
Right.
And it's like, I can just hit shuffle all on Spotify and not.
Oh, yeah.
You get what I'm saying when I say that. Like, you can hit shuffle all and just be like, I really like this.
Yeah, there's no requirement to how much you have to listen to an artist by any means. But at the same time, I do understand and appreciate that for everyone, there are certain artists that serve as this particularly outsized role in your life, right? Like everyone I can think of that I know who's like really into music, there's a few bands, a few albums, you know, that like those are their people, you know, like I identify really strongly with Greg Dooley and the Afghan Wigs, for instance, and you,
I recall that,
has always been very much like Nik Cave and other artists too for both of us, but you know what I mean, like there's super fans, but at the same time I'm not going to
era, you know, and I had
yeah, of course. That was an early gateway to me into goth too. I mean, I never really mentioned it to you, I don't think, but I mean, like in 6th, 7th grade, I was all about the Depeche Mode. I was wearing black nail polish, like in 91, 92.
My mom is one of those, I'm not a regular mom, I'm a cool mom. And she had me listening to Violator in the car as a little kid.
That's very cool. That is very cool. She has good taste. My mom was listening to Travis Tritt.
I'm aging myself now, but like...
It's all right. It's kind of inevitable.
I think I was just in or just out of a car seat, but I clearly remember hearing the album on cassette in her Saturn or whatever it was. Like.
So back to Let Love In, I'm going to ask you, can you name a single best track or at least your favorite track from this album?
You know, the opening to Do You Love Me, I think that, like I was saying earlier, how that was my, what is this bass that's dropping? Mm-hmm. Oh, and then a gong hits or something. What is, like, yes, done, sold. I'm into it. Like, but I always said that I wanted to get a continuation of the tattoo sleeves that I have, that I want to grow across my back. I wanted a lyric put in of, I met her on a night of fire and noise. which is like the first line of that album and that first song.
Good line.
So good. But I actually did not get that. That is not the Nik Crave tattoo that I ended up getting. So.
Nik Crave's one of those artists that's so prolific that for me, I've picked and chosen like which albums I kind of dig deeply into. I've listened to them all. So this for me was never an album that I dug that deeply into personally. I was always more of I like Dig Lazarus Dig and Abattoir Blues and Murder Ballads, of course. But for you, it seems like this is one of those seminal albums. So that's your favorite song. Is there a song that you think is like kind of underrated, an underdog song, either like that people don't talk about generally, or maybe that you yourself have not appreciated?
I do think, and this sounds like I'm taking the easy out, is the Do You Love Me Part 2, the final track on the album. Oh, it's fucked up, man. Like, I'm gonna sing the praises of Do You Love Me, the first track, for a second, because it helps explain why I think Do You Love Me Part 2 is incredibly underrated.
Okay.
Do You Love Me, like I said, it has a slow, good bass build, like gong hits, and then all the music comes in, and Meteor on a Night of Fire and Noise, and it's this passionate, like, I'm obsessed with you and I need you love song that he goes off on. The lyrics on Do You Love Me Part 2 are not great. Like they're great in that they are not great. Like, it is some fucked up stuff, and like I don't know the proper musical terms, but it clearly is carrying the same tunes and notes and mirroring Do You Love Me, but it breaks it down. It's those memes where it's like, what is your pop song, but put it in a minor key and it sounds weird, kind of like,
Yeah,
it's that. And the lyrics are a lot deeper, and they are not, it's not a radio friendly song.
Box my pulpit with theater ceiling, the silver star spangled, and the coins in my pocket go jingle, jangle.
it's funny though you say that, because Red Right Hand is the big single from the album, and I mean that song is such a huge hit. I feel like it says good things about the era, that America or the world in general just went, yeah, this song fucking rules, because it's not a super conventional song.
Yeah,
not a lot of his stuff is really.
You can tell that Nik Crave loves Leonard Cohen when you hear a song like Red Right Hand.
Yeah, okay, that's a really good point.
And also, honestly, like that is one of my, almost my pick was Red Right Hand, because there is something to be said for the perfect recording of him, the flick of a lighter and the first drag of a cigarette in the opening of Red Right Hand. Like...
Take a little walk to the edge of town and go across the track.
But this is the way that it's recorded, and you can hear him exhale the first words with a drag of a cigarette. It's painting such a picture in your brain without having to see anything.
And he's such a storyteller, and like that song in particular, I don't know what the story quite is. Something like the devil is using capitalism to exploit the poor or something. I don't know what's happening there, but it's really ominous and fun.
On a gathering storm comes a tall, handsome man in a dusty black coat with a red right hand.
He could just be like, hey, this sounded really good, so I put it all together because I was drinking and it's fine, whatever. I also think it could be deeper and be like, where are you in your life at that time and what is it saying to you? And so, for us, we can be like, capitalism is terrible. And
well, I mean, the whole the stacks of green paper in his red right hand bit, it just seems like he's talking I don't know, and it's like this almost Tom Waitian character, moving from place to place, like he's a dark, shadowy figure. I don't know.
For sure.
And also this album, I find other people's struggles with their faith really interesting. And this album is so fraught with that, because he's gone back and forth on Christianity throughout his life. And you can tell he's on the cusp one way or the other around this point.
For sure. And I mean, if you back up and look at the whole catalog, he does a cover gospel Jesus met the woman at the well, but also then he writes songs about the devil and just
Even on this album, he refers to like Jesus Christ, our Savior, or whatever, which I don't know how sardonic the tone is. I think he kind of means it. It's always imbued in his stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of religious tones, and you can get, I mean, again, like you can get very deep into his other writings.
Mm-hmm.
And to his credit, it's both a newsletter and then he answers, fan mail.
That's fun.
And it's called the Red Hand Files. Like, but I think he has said it's either, I don't want to misquote, but about the song Tupelo or Red Right Hand. He's like, if I never hear that again, I'd be happy. Like,
I can understand that. Whatever the hits are, you get sick of him as a performer.
Okay, so now's a good time to give my shout out. So as I've been Goth Lauren since early on freshman year of college. No, not that Lauren. I'm talking about Goth Lauren.
Oh, that's how it came about.
And then it sort of has stuck through a professional career as a hairstylist. And then when I branched out and did internet entertainment, I said, I need a name for this. And it just popped into my head was Nik Crave. It's Nik-Crave. Like, just seemed so obvious. He had been at that point my favorite artist for a very long time. I had seen him live a few times by then.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, my shameless plug is nickcrave.cammodels.com. That's nikrave.cammodels.com.
Check it out, folks.
It's actually very fun. I always have a good playlist. And I do love, though, when people come into my chat room to hang out with me and say, oh, your name is Nik Crave. Have you heard of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds? And I'm like, no, I have not. Why? Could
Explain
you tell me about
please.
that? Like, as I'm sitting there wearing, slide style sandals that say Bad Seed on them.
I don't know that the dudes that come to talk to you necessarily have like their brains fully engaged in that.
You'd be surprised. Some of them actually want to sit there and have kind of a similar conversation what we're having right now.
I'm not that surprised. I do believe it.
Or like, hey, so you must like Nick Cave. So what do you think about the whole thing? I'm like, okay, let's.
All right. Get paid to talk about Nik Cave. For me, I got to say that the song that for me is underrated on the album, not that I don't think that people talk about it generally, but like for me, I underrated it because as a kid, again, I got into murder ballads first. And a lot of the stuff I always liked was always the really kind of depressing and really slower kind of stuff, the much more maudlin Nick Cave. I didn't really come to appreciate the rockin' Nick Cave until Dig Lazarus Dig a little bit later on. And so for me on this album, Thirsty Dog. That song fucking rocks. I really like Thirsty Dog. I like the vibe of it. I like the kind of prosaic, almost like he's just like, hey, I'm just a fucking drunk, sad guy. Yeah, there's none of like the epic themes that we're wrestling with. It's just like I'm fucking drunk and sad.
And also, I picture it's the drunk and lovesick guy chasing a woman up the stairs. I don't mean that in a non-consensual way, but just like, oh my God, I'm home and I'm just a thirsty dog and I just want to like, and I'm sorry I'm being, like, the song is, the refrain is, I'm sorry, 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 sorry. I'm sorry I'm a piece of shit, but like, gee, aren't I lovable? Like,
and then you say lovesick, like the song I Let Love In, like what a fucking, speaking of maudlin, I mean, just like the love is a cautionary tale. It's just so, I love it. I love it so much. I
think that's a part of why I do have, like we talked about Ghosteen being amazing, murder ballads, Abattoir Blues. Like there's so many good albums. Yes. And even you get into Grinder Man and you get into Birthday Party, you get into
he's got solo stuff even, or his soundtracks.
The soundtrack stuff doing with Warren Ellis, like, which has little to no lyrics on the soundtrack stuff.
So what about, is there a weakest track on this album?
So we planned this a while ago, and I'm kind of glad you asked me that only today.
Oh, really?
So I had to like not ruminate on it too much.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Because this is one of my all-time, regardless of the year, whatever, this is one of my all-time favorite albums.
Yeah.
Desert Island Disc, whatever. But it was telling to me that the second I read your text message asking me to pick my least favorite track,
You knew which one it was.
Jangling Jack.
Jangling Jack. It's totally fucking
I'm sorry,
Jangling Jack.
like-
No, of course it is. I'm sorry. It stands out as not as good as the others to me as well.
But you know what? I think it is a good song. It's not on this album. Like, it doesn't do it for me on this album. It's too jarring and
Yeah,
it feels out of place.
I concur. I don't think that there's a bad song on the album. And there's sometimes when I do this on the show where I'm like, it's super obvious. Sometimes I have to really mull it over. And like, is there like even one I could choose? And sometimes it's just really obvious. And on this album for me, it was like, oh yeah, fucking Jangling Jack.
Yeah. And even the opening, it has like some distortion and crap. And I'm just like, I don't want to hear this now.
Yeah, and every other song is pretty much a banger that I would never even dream of skipping. So that's kind of how I feel too.
That's one that I do like, but not in context. That's, yeah.
That makes sense. And that speaks like albums are such cohesive whole thing. So even like one song can throw that dynamic off. It didn't ruin the album or anything.
That is one thing to sound like an old person. But I do think that people have lost these days. People don't go and get an album, listen to the whole thing like start to finish.
Yes.
I think that's changing a little bit, but I think going back to when it was still, you gotta make an album that has 12 songs or so, and some of them you can tell, even from amazing artists, are like, oh, you just threw 12 fucking songs together.
Right.
Versus like, you had a cohesive journey through whatever this was you were going through.
Right.
The person I mentioned that I was dating, that I listened to it in their computer room and stuff, was a horrid relationship. And so for a while, I had a lot of memories associated with, unfortunately, like abusive relationships, and that was bad. But like, I kind of love reclaiming things.
Yeah.
And rediscovering this album and making it my own, and enough to the point where it almost became an accident that like, oh, Nik Crave's my favorite. Okay, I'm using that as a stage name. Okay, I'm doing that, like.
Yeah.
And I just kind of fully leaned into it. And this is one of the albums that let me do that. And honestly, like I said, the underrated song is pretty great for that. It's such a overarching great album that I keep coming back to it. I love, obviously, all of his stuff, but the fact that I keep saying, okay, that is the lyric. Okay, that one. Okay, that. Like,
and he's such a, or I guess should say they, because Nik Cave and the Bad Seeds have been such a huge part for you. And for this to be like the introductory album, that's always really important for your, like your main artists. So is this an album you ever put down and walked away from for a while? Or is this something you kind of routinely have returned to throughout your life?
I actually do put it down, not intentionally necessarily.
Well, he's got so many other albums that you could do that.
Right. So there's that reason. And I'll get, like I said, with Ghosteen coming out so close to pandemic lockdown stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Skeleton Tree came out at a very crossroadsy time.
In your life?
Yes.
Or his? Or both, I guess.
Well,
seems like both.
Both. Because he wrote that about losing
the passing of his first son.
Yes. Right? I believe it was one of the twins. So not first son, but like one of his twins.
Hasn't he had 2 children pass?
Yes, correct. I believe neither were his first child. Yeah, so Skeleton Tree was all about that. And then he did that fantastic movie.
I actually haven't seen that.
There was 2 of them.
One's called something Idiot or
One More Time with Feeling.
Idiot Prayer, I think, is the other one.
That's a different thing.
I'm losing track of his things.
So there was supposed to be a tour for that. And then COVID. Idiot Prayer. I was not there. Like, because it's supposed to be the whole band and a tour.
Right. It's just him. I've got a question for you that you probably have wrestled with before. What's your favorite Nik Cave album? Is it this one? Is it Let Love In?
It might be this one. It might be Carnage.
Oh, really? That's really grabbed a hold of you.
Carnage really hit me, and I think it hit me because of when I heard it.
Mm-hmm.
Much like this album. I think this is my Desert Island disc. I think I'm going to pick this one. Yeah.
I love it. I'm glad that I got to talk to you about this one then. That's fun. Now, you said you've seen him live before a few times, it sounds like?
Yes.
Or you've seen them live? How many times have you seen him?
3.
That's pretty great.
Yeah. I had to touch him. That was my...
You got to touch him. Where did you touch him?
anyone who's familiar with him and his live stuff knows he is a good performer on stage and does that whole
very, yeah.
Like hold it, yeah, hold like
touching.
sweeping his hands. You know, he stuck his hand through the crowd and like he grabbed my hand for a hot second, which to me was an eternity, and I loved it.
I remember the time I touched Greg Dooley. It's like I dream about it still.
Yeah,
so
and I touched his shoe while he was up on stage. Well, I was also, of course, had fought my way from the section I was in. I was allowed to be where I was.
But you had to worm your way up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, still have bruises to this day on my rib cage of being crushed up against at the Keswick Theater in Philadelphia. So thankfully, it was not a giant, massive, bigger venues that he might have played.
Yeah. That's awesome. You got to be that close to see him.
I could have died happy that night. And that was actually the first night I saw him. And I actually bought a drink for a bad seed that night before the show.
Nice. Which one?
Conway Savage, rest in peace. Passed away relatively recently.
Yeah.
I saw this guy sitting across the bar. I was at a bar across from the venue prior to the show. And I saw this guy. I was like, it's gotta be, he's definitely in the band. I couldn't place his name.
But sometimes you can just fucking tell when you see one of the dudes. It's like, they're so lanky and leather clad.
Yeah. And also, I did recognize the face, for sure.
Yeah, well, that's a dead giveaway.
But couldn't place his name. So I was rapidly Googling, and that's Conway Savage. And I saw him go outside to have a cigarette. And so I was like, this is my chance. So I went outside and asked him for a light. Mm-hmm. And then, very casual, very cool, said, I'm sorry, is your name Conway Savage? Oh, yeah. And I was like, you're in the bad seeds, right? Like, oh, I'm going to that show tonight. As if I wasn't internally just like
freaking out
and screaming. And I have to say, looking back at it, wow, I played that shockingly cool. And having worked at, work venues and things like that and been around bands and have to, you gotta be cool. You can't be an asshole if you're working. And then later, I think I had a meltdown. I was like, oh my God.
It happened.
He bought me a whiskey and it was great. It was the best whiskey I've ever had in my life. It was not. I did not like whiskey at the time, so.
What track do you want to use to go out on?
Same one that I actually would like to go out on. Lay Me Low.
Play that at your funeral, right?
Play Lay Me Low at my funeral, play it out of the podcast.
Everybody hears that. It's a very important and now officially public thing.
Yeah.
I've got my funeral songs. I get it. All right, Lay Me Low. And that's such a fucking great song. It's so tongue-in-cheek. It's so great. It's so Nik Crave.
It's very, yeah, I'm dead. And isn't that awful? But like, do you really care in the grand scheme of, to quote a different fantastic author, which we didn't even talk about how Nik Crave has also written lots of books that are fantastic, but.
And screenplays.
Yeah. On a long enough timeline, everyone's life expectancy drops to 0. So I like that he's tongue in cheek with it and that it is sad and it's stoic and terrible, but also like, whatever.
It's like funny. Yeah.
We're on to the next one.
Awesome. Good choice. So I imagine you've been listening to this album a lot lately, as I have been. What else do you listen to? Anything else on your playlist of late?
Yeah, actually, I have been really into Stoneburner.
Not familiar. What kind of music are we talking?
Definitely more like harder industrial stuff.
Okay. I should have guessed.
Yeah. Yeah. Getting some political things going on with that particular artist that are very good. Cool. Stoneburner, This Machine Kills.
Not fascist, just it kills. That's funny.
Yeah. The lyrics touch back on that.
I would hope.
Yeah.
If it's political and making that kind of reference. That's twice Woody Guthrie has come up in this episode.
Yeah. My sister had me listen to some Taylor Swift lately, and I'm sad to admit that,
That's fair. That's fine. I mean, I've been listening to the new National album that Taylor Swift appears on, so I guess I've been listening to Taylor Swift.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to that yet.
It's great. So I always end the show with some sort of 90s question. Sometimes it's like a trivia question. More often than not, like tonight, it's just kind of what would you prefer from the 90s? And I try when I can, I'm getting better at it, I think, to like tailor things specifically to my guests, the questions that I'm asking. And I figured, well, Lauren, you like things that are goth.
True.
And I like movies. But as far as goth movies from 94, there's only so many. There is, of course, The Crow. But figured I'll make an exception here. And I'm going to ask you to pick your favorite of these goth movies from the 1990s.
Okay. Well, yeah, you can't pick The Crow because I did tune into your older podcast back in pandemic.
Yes, Cinema 9.
And that still exists. About The Crow.
Yeah, I do love The Crow. So that came out in 1994, and that is, of course, an option for you to choose
And that
from.
album, ugh.
That's a whole nother beast, the album. Also from 1994. I don't know if you know this movie. I don't know if anyone knows this movie. It's in America, it's known as Cemetery Man. Everywhere else, it's known as Delamore. With Rupert Everett, he works in a cemetery, and the people are coming back to life.
I don't know the movie, but I have seen posters.
Yes, it's classic in the gothic genre. Lots and lots of necrophilia in there, if that's your thing.
I feel like that's one of those people back in the day would use it as a goth litmus test.
Yeah,
which I
the reason
hate.
I chose it. Yeah, gatekeeping again, right? It's actually a shitty movie.
It's very gatekeeping. It's like, oh, do you like this?
I love Rupert Everett, and I love the idea behind the movie. But all right, so you've not seen that one, so we'll probably stick with ones that you've actually seen. What about the Addams Family movie? That is an option. The first one, I'll make that one an option. Interview with a Vampire came out in 1993, I believe. Super fucking gothic. May have been 94. The Craft was 1996. I cannot talk goth movies of the 90s and not mention The Craft. And last but not least, of course, Tim Burton's Edward Scissorhands. Super gothic. So which of these movies, of these goth films from the 1990s, and we can just scratch Cemetery Man from the list, are you going to sit down and watch with me? Edward Scissorhands, The Craft, Interview with a Vampire, or The Crow, or Addams Family?
Are we friends? Because I feel like this is a really rude question.
Oh my God, I've hurt your feelings.
That you're asking me to pick one. It's like asking me to pick between my 3 cats. Which one is the cutest? Addams Family is both hilarious and has fantastic like nods to several things, and also is gothic in aesthetic, but not a goth movie.
Okay, sure. All right, yeah, it's more of a family fun
Yeah,
film.
it's a family fun movie, but it has a goth aesthetic.
For sure, very.
And you can branch off into like the Wednesday thing being great, but like I'm talking about the movie that you're referring to is very much like a cute, what was it, PG-13 movie?
Yeah, it's a family film.
Yeah, Joan Cusack, perfect. Like,
hey, Christopher Lloyd, perfect.
Oh yeah, Christopher Lloyd.
Who would have guessed?
We went to the same high school, not at the same time, but
I would not think.
he got expelled from my high school, actually.
No shit.
Yeah.
So are you picking Addams Family then? This is your choice?
No, I'm talking about how great each movie is.
I've given you like a hard decision is what you're telling me.
I mean, as a hairstylist, Edward Scissorhands, I'm obviously biased towards.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I can't choose.
You choose none of these movies. You boycott.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to pick for you.
It's The Craft.
It's The Craft?
It's The Craft.
Okay.
It's so bad. It's so bad. As a person who currently actively practices, it's so bad, and I love it, and it's just so bad. I'm gonna pick The Craft. Like.
Okay. All right. I'm glad you picked one. That's good. I'm gonna go with Edward Scissorhands. That to me is like important classic American
it's important,
cinema.
It's gorgeous, and I think I just have to appreciate The Craft for getting lots of little baby witches into things.
Yeah, it had that Love Spit Love covering the Smiths on there. Who could forget
gorgeous.
that?
Shout out to every chick who has a "We Are the Weirdos" Mr. tattoo right now. Like, you know, like, gotta love it.
That feels like a really good note to end on. Thank you so much for coming on, Lauren. I really appreciate you taking time.
Thank you for having me.
That.
Thank you for indulging my gothy goodness. I appreciate it.
How nice it was to talk to my good friend Lauren. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. I'm feeling really relaxed right now. I'm out on my mother's screened-in porch. I'm surrounded by 5 dogs. I love it. I had said on my last episode, episode 17, that I probably would be a little late getting this episode out, and I am. And I said I would probably not be late with episode 19, but I make no promises. I'll get back on schedule soon, though. My throat, does it sound a little scratchy? I've been sucking in this Canadian wildfire smoke, I guess. Want to come on the show? It'd be cool if you did. Maybe you want to talk about a band from 1993 that I never really got into their other stuff, but I really love the 1993 album Into the Labyrinth by Dead Can Dance. Had the single that you're hearing now, the ubiquitous Mr. Lovegrove, and what a jam it is. So maybe you want to talk about Into the Labyrinth, or maybe you want to talk about any other album from 1993 to 1994. Shoot me a line, let me know. You can message me on whatever social media. You can email me at 9394podcast@gmail.com. You could, I'd say, like, do a smoke signal or like skywriting or something, but it would be lost in the haze that I'm looking at right now. But you could do pretty much really whatever album you want from 1993 to 1994. Just let me know. And yeah, I think that's about it. Some of you have left reviews. I appreciate that so much. Please rate and review if you like the show. And yeah, that's it. Thanks. Bye. '93-'94, a music podcast with Travis Roy, is a labor of love. It is not and never will be monetized. Please don't sue.